of June and begin by acknowledging that the District of Tofino conducts its business in Tla-o-qui-aht territory, and that we are joining this meeting today as members of council, mostly from Tla-o-qui-aht territory, but also from Coast Salish territory on the other side of the island. Good morning, everyone. I also will let everyone know, remind everyone that we are recording today's meeting and that it is posted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. I will actually, before I ask for a motion to adopt the agenda, I'm going to ask council by making a motion myself to amend the agenda to move item 8.2, council grants, to precede item 8.1, the arts and culture grants. So is there a seconder? Is that you, Dan? Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Motion is carried. And then if I could have, please, a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Thank you, Councillor McMaster, seconded by Councillor Law. All in favor? Thank you. That is everybody. All right, we have two sets of minutes to consider, and the first are the minutes from the regular council meeting held May 26th for adoption.
Move adoption.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Were there any errors or omissions that anybody noted in the minutes? All right, seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Thank you, that's everyone. Motion is carried. And then there are minutes from the special council meeting that was held on the 1st of June.
Move adoption.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Law. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. The motion is carried. So public comment, I don't think there's any public comment in the Q&A. So we'll keep moving on. The mayor's report, so two things. First of all, I just want to take a moment to note and acknowledge the losses that Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation has recently experienced. And just to pass on the condolences of the District of Tofino for all of those losses, and take some time to remember how incredible each of these people were to their friends and their family, and acknowledge the pain and suffering that people in Tla-o-qui-aht are experiencing right now. The second thing that I would like to do is to honor one of our own district employees. And that person is April Fremont, who is actually on the 13th of June having her 20th anniversary of employment with the District of Tofino. So April has served the District of Tofino for 20 years. Starting on June 13th, 2000, but she actually worked as a summer student before then, in the summers of 1998 and 1999. April Clark, as she was known then, grew up in Victoria, and she attended UVic before she moved to Tofino, where obviously she has since settled and done incredible work for the District of Tofino and is raising her family here. So she first came to the District of Tofino as an office assistant, working from 2000 to 2003, and then she served as the acting director of Parks and Recreation, filling in on a maternity leave. She then, after that, became the planning assistant / Parks and Recreation assistant, and a recreation programmer then from 2004 to 2013. In 2013, April became the manager of RMI Services, and now we have it as the longest job title in the world, the manager of Public Spaces, Cultural and Visitor Initiatives. So I want to say to April, thank you for 20 incredible years. It is, it's a feat, and you're one of you have the elephant's memory now, because you're one of our longest serving employees, and we're really grateful for everything that you have done for us. So congratulations to April.
Thank you, Mayor Osborne.
And your CAO, our CAO, has a certificate for you, and you can hang that on your wall. So he will present it to you afterwards. Okay, thanks for that, everybody. Moving on, we're going to then consider council grants first, because we reordered the agenda. And this is our first time doing council grants online. So it's a little different than in past years, but I think this one might actually be pretty straightforward. So I'll just start off by saying thank you to everybody who's applied for council grants. The projects that are applied for each year are things that help make our community a better place to live in. They increase our quality of life, and I know that the funds mean a lot to the nonprofit societies and people who apply for them to help them do these things for us. And I wanted to just remind everyone that we have the council grant policy, that we have the list of council grant applications, and we can see that it is actually undersubscribed this year. So of the $20,000 that is available, $15,000 has been, oh, I skipped correspondence. I've just been notified. You know what? I'm gonna go backwards and we'll do the correspondence. I'm really sorry. So you can reserve those comments for later. Okay, so let's go back to correspondence. Item 7.1, we've got 2 letters on the same subject from Brad Dusseault and Mark McLellan regarding 4th Street safety. So I do know that our staff has replied to them, and maybe Brent, you can just give a few words and let us know what the status of things is. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
So I think most of us probably realize this has been a bit of a long-standing issue. We've made a number of attempts to have some improvements over there. Just to summarize, we didn't used to have a loading zone there, and the delivery trucks, 3 primary ones, used to park right in the lane of traffic while they were unloading. At times we would have more than one delivery truck that would park there, and they would both be unloading at the same time. Some of our residents have expressed concerns about safety issues. Since that time, we have made a number of attempts at changes to try and improve the flow of traffic and focusing on the safety. So some of those changes have been establishing a loading zone at the current location where we didn't have one in past, so on that cobblestone area, which is currently from 6:30 a.m. until noon. We tried an additional loading zone on Campbell Street near the Sugar Shack. We had that going for several months, never actually got used by the delivery drivers, even though it was their suggested location. We have spoken with each of the delivery companies, their management, as well as the drivers themselves. Most of them have been very willing to work with us and have tried to take steps to use the loading zone and those sorts of pieces. We've worked with the RCMP as well too to discuss their perspective on the safety concerns at that intersection, and if they had any suggestions for change. At this point, my last conversations with them was that they didn't feel that there was any real serious safety concerns and that they were happy with it. They expressed some frustration about getting numerous emails from community members about the concern, but they do see it slightly different. And then we worked with the school as well too to ensure that 4th Street was not being used consistently as a route for the buses to travel down that way and therefore add to the congestion. And the principal was very happy to reroute most of the bus traffic over to Gibson Street. And then countless hours of just monitoring the area as well too with our bylaw staff, at times being parked in that area for hours. And the focus of that was 2-pronged. It was to speak with any of the delivery drivers that might be new, because we do, for most part, we have the same drivers repeatedly, but there are some substitutes every once in a while. So trying to bring everybody up to speed on how we would like them to interact with that intersection. And then also dealing with the motorists that are consistently using the loading zone during the morning hours for parking to access some of the businesses. I think when you speak with the delivery drivers, that has been their greatest frustration, is that people are constantly parking in there. And so we've spent hours trying to educate community members and visitors on alternative areas for parking and making sure that people are aware of what the timing is. And then last week, myself and Fraser Work, our Director of Infrastructure and Public Works, we went over as well too to assess the situation and get his perspective on possible changes as well. So we are looking at reworking some of the signage, and we're going to have to approach it slowly and cautiously again too to make sure we're making the right decisions. But it is under review. I have spoken with Mr. Dusseault on this a number of times, made suggestions. I unfortunately don't feel that that they necessarily will meet needs from his perspective. I did go and visit with Grandma Marg just over a week ago as well too, and we talked about a number of the issues. Her concern is more about the delivery trucks sort of pulling into her side of the intersection a little bit so that they can back into the alleyway behind Shed, so they can do deliveries over there. Mark did indicate that she feels like using the alleyway behind Shed is a suitable spot, although it may not make everybody happy. And she would like to help assist in educating community members as to staying out of the loading zone so that the delivery trucks have the proper access. So that's where we're at right now. Always willing to receive the feedback and look at alternatives. We've gone through a number of them so far, and we're certainly not going to give up. But if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address those specifically as well.
Thanks, Brent. Are there any questions? Yeah, Councillor Steer.
Hi, thank you, Brent, and appreciate all the effort that has gone into mitigating this issue. One of the suggestions, and this is just posing that had been suggested, was an increase in that loading zone time to, I believe it was past 4 p.m. Had that been looked into, and in your opinion, is that a suitable suggestion to help mitigate that issue?
Yeah, it has definitely been considered. It's one that has come up from the start, and there's a couple issues with it that I see. First of all, by having a loading zone there, we're really talking about a major change in behaviors for people that are consistently using that area for shopping and those sorts of things. For years, people have had access to park there throughout the day. And despite the signs, despite the presence of the bylaw staff and myself being over there, we have the same people that continue to park there day after day after day. Some of them have received multiple tickets, but the behaviors don't seem to be changing. So at the present time, we have sort of a half day of loading zone times, and then the public is welcome to park there in the afternoons. The amount of resources it takes to just manage that and try and keep people out of that loading zone for the morning is really, really challenging. If we extend that and go all day, we're now talking about changing people's behaviors for an entire day. And when you speak with individuals in the community, most of the time their response is, I'm only here for 2 minutes. And I fully understand that 2 minutes does not seem like an awful lot of time. However, we cannot predict when the delivery vehicles are coming, and they always seem to come during that 2-minute period. They will blast the horn to indicate that they're not happy with the fact that there's a motorist in there, which again then adds to the frustration of the community members because of the noise. And then they will park in the street, and they will go back to the old habits that we worked so hard to see change in. So that's the one issue with extending the time. I also did receive a letter from a community member within the week that had received a parking ticket for being in that loading zone during the morning hours. And they expressed that not being able to park there is really challenging for them because they have mobility issues. And even to walk the 50 meters to the next available parking spaces just felt like it was too much. So they are actually seeking to have the regular vehicle parking hours increased in exchange for giving up loading zone time. So like many of our issues, we have both sides of the situation that are really, we would like everybody to be happy, but I think we can see that that's not going to be possible. So those are the two challenges that I see with that, because it has been considered for a long time now.
Thanks. Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I was wondering if any painted curbs or paint right on the spots might help. Maybe even putting in a handicap zone or something that maybe could be shared with the loading somehow. I don't know how that'll work, but people do seem to respect handicap zones at least. So those are my suggestions or thoughts anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the idea of being able to paint a curb, it adds clarity to things. But then I think at the same time, if you're trying to have it be mixed use, it makes it look like it's permanent. And, you know, I'm not really sure what the best scenario is, but if we paint it a different color, then people may assume that that's loading zone at all times. I think, you know, if it was an accessibility space, that's a nice option for the community. Absolutely. I think that may be better suited within one of those parking lots that we have an accessibility space, because again, if we put it in that area that we would like to have as mixed use, we can't account for the timing of the deliveries or the potential users of that accessibility space. And again, we may still be in the same scenario that we're in. So we're definitely still looking at a number of issues. Although I will say, as far as the painted curbs, we still have a number of people that park repeatedly in front of painted curbs with fire hydrants, and also the accessibility spaces as well too. So it's I really go around in circles on this one, trying to come up with what's going to work the best, most consistently.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thanks very much, Brent, for your explanations and your efforts.
We'll keep council and mayor and council updated as we come up with some more solutions and prepare to make some more changes.
Thank you. The next two items of correspondence are regarding the Tofino Natural Heritage Society, and they are regarding the Tofino Housing Corporation and the housing proposal at DL114, and they both comment on the location of the housing. And I do know that Ian Scott, the executive director of the Housing Corporation, has replied to at least the first letter writer, Eileen Floody, but I'm not certain about Christine. I can find out, and I wondered if council had any comments or questions on the letters. Okay. Oh, Councillor Anderson.
I did express in an earlier council meeting that I would like to see the areas around the buildings that that have environmental values and aren't being used by the development, that we put a protection on at least some of those lands surrounding the buildings. And I'd just like to reiterate that I would still be looking for that to happen. I'm not sure if other council members support that idea or not. But yeah, I want to keep that in mind as we move forward on this, that we can take some of the highest environmental values there at least and put some protections in place on them. I'm not sure if in the one letter, 2 trees were mentioned that have some wildlife value as well. So I would like to know if the development truly is going to impact that or not as we move forward as well. So that's my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. So with respect to the first part of your comments, that is exactly the discussion that council had in the as we went into the first reading of the rezoning around some of the areas in District Lot 114, for example, riparian areas, wetland areas, areas that are of high environmental value, and putting some kind of protection in place for those. And then to the second, I don't know any specifics, the details of that, but I think that is something we could ask Ian Scott to look into, and he is most knowledgeable about the environmental report and work that was done to get ready for the development. Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Law?
I actually agree with Councillor Anderson. That was my point and question as well. Just wanted to see that to move forward, looking at protecting those areas.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thanks everybody. Okay, now we will go to council grants. And you remember everything I already said, so let's get going. So we have the grants before you. Because they are undersubscribed, perhaps one efficient way of going about this is to just open this up and ask if there are any questions or comments about any of the particular applications, any concerns about any of the individual applications that would cause you concern or not wanting to fund them or fund them fully. And if there are none, then I think this one will be quite easy. So I'll open it up. Oh, and Nyla, did you have any introductory comments you wanted to make about council grants?
No, I don't have any.
Thanks. Okay, Councillor Steer.
I think, it's nothing specific about any of the grants. It was just more about the policy in general, and I don't know if this is the time to bring that up, but there was only in the policy discussion there in the one opening paragraph of the policy where it talks about as some of the general guidelines. One of them is to look toward for the organizations to look towards financial independence and fiscal sustainability, and assistance will be provided on an annual basis. One of my concerns with that is that for most nonprofits, and having worked for one for almost a decade, one of the problems is financial stability, and part of the granting process is inclusive of maintaining a financial stability for these organizations. So at some point, I wouldn't mind having a discussion about that almost requirement for them to show that sustainability, which I totally understand the point of having it there. But recognizing that there are few mechanisms for nonprofits to attain that sustainability over a long-term period. I don't know if this is the time to have that discussion, but just wanted to flag that since it is a council grant, and this is a policy that I think we have a little more control over in general. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Steer. I would think that right now isn't maybe a time for a detailed discussion about the council policy, grant policy, but what I would suggest, and let's go through the arts and culture grants too. And then, I mean, we have a number of discussions about these every year, and it is the perfect thing, I think, to bring to a committee of the whole discussion if we want to review the policies for future years, and then we can provide some direction to our staff and they can bring something back to a council meeting if we want to see some changes. That would be great. Thank you. Are there any other comments? Yes, Councillor McQuaid.
May I also, thank you, may I ask what the policy is if we are undersubscribed and what we can do with the balance?
Certainly. Nyla, do you want to help us with that?
Sure. If there is an amount left over, it's not addressed in the policy. So these two amounts, the council grants and arts and culture grant amounts that are adopted in the financial plan, are there to be spent for that purpose. If they aren't spent for that purpose, they can be reallocated by council. We wouldn't need to do a financial plan amendment because the overall expenditures would remain the same. But I would just request that council make a resolution to decide to indicate where the remainder of the funds would go to.
Thank you, Nyla. So for example, if you are interested in having some of the underspent funds available for arts and culture grant funding, I actually have had some help from Nyla and Elise on a motion to bring we can consider if that's something we want to do. Councillor Chalmers?
Yes, I just had a question for staff just on the Pacific Rim Hospice Society having not returned their evaluation. Is that in the works? Or are we expecting it? I think they're a great, cause, but just want to check if that was.
Yeah, we just like to report out to council who has submitted and who hasn't, but we work with the applicants to make sure that those are received before the funds are expended.
Okay,
or granted for the current year.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have, let me ask this in the reverse. Is everybody comfortable with the applications as presented and would be prepared to fund them fully? Yeah. Okay, straw poll, thank you. In that case then, we could consider a motion that the council grants be awarded as follows. BC Conservation Foundation 2,000, Tla-o-qui-aht Action 1,000, Friends of Tla-o-qui-aht Sound 2,000, Pacific Rim Hospice Society 2,000, Surfrider Pacific Rim 2,000, Tofino Community Food Initiative 2,000, West Coast Community Resources Society 2,000, and the Wickaninnish Elementary Parent Advisory Council 2,000, and that unspent council grant funding of up to $5,000 be allocated to the 2020 Arts and Culture grants.
Seconded.
Thank you. All right, I will have moved that and it is seconded. Are there any questions? Comments? Okay, then all in favor? Thank you, that's everyone. Motion carried and congratulations to the recipients. So now we'll turn our attention to the Arts and Culture grant before us. Nyla, any comments you wanted to make on this before we dive in?
No, no comments.
Okay, so in this case, just two things to note maybe going forward, and then I'll open it up for questions. One is that the Arts and Culture grant funding is oversubscribed. We have reallocated money from the underspent council grant, so they are able to be fully funded. However, there are a couple that, while it's not a strict requirement, we do have a guideline of requesting that each application be up to about 10% or be 10%. And so that I would just leave that for your consideration as well. All right. Any questions? Councillor Anderson.
Hi. My question was that I was just wondering if anyone remembers why Ariosa was not funded. Was it because it was oversubscribed and we just sort of went that way, or was there another reason? Last year we did not fund the Ariosa dance grant. Anyways, I have no nothing against it if we've got room for it, but I was just wondering if there's another reason that I don't know of.
So yes, in previous years, the Arts and Culture grants have definitely been oversubscribed. Nyla has a comment.
They didn't apply last year.
That's an easy answer then. Councillor McMaster?
Just a question, in light of the COVID restrictions on size of gatherings, and who knows what it's going to be like going forward, but how will some of these events go ahead? At the community hall or the Legion or something like this?
Thank you, Councillor McMaster. So we reached out to all the applicants in early April, I believe, and we asked the question whether the events that were planned could be modified to suit the restrictions that were in place. We had one applicant say no and remove themselves from the process, but all other applicants have indicated that they could modify their event. We didn't ask for new applications just because that would be too onerous for the applicants as well as administratively. So we will be working with the applicants to ensure that they are modified, their programs are modified and adhere to any restrictions in place.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
My other question was, there were two events. The Ariosa dance one was to take place in April or May, which is past. So I'm not sure if they still want to go ahead if that is funded. The other one was the Jazz Festival was, suggested date was around June 28th, I believe. So that's a very short time to organize a jazz festival. So I'm wondering if council might try to consider these grants earlier in a process or something to give more of an opportunity for these events to work out well. Just the timing of our approval is a bit complicated, I think, for some of them.
I think, Nyla, what I'm hearing you say is that since the applicants were all contacted and feel there's some way they can go ahead, my expectation would be that dates will change or and things will just be delivered in a different way. So if they can't be or won't be, then the applicants won't, although they'll be eligible for the funding, they won't ask for it maybe, or I'm not too sure how that would work if.
Yeah, we have had situations in the past where events haven't taken place and the funds have been returned. So we stay in contact with the applicants throughout the year. For this year, we are making decisions later than in previous years. The policy does state that we make decisions by May 15th or after the financial plan is adopted. This year we were behind due to COVID, and we weren't able to bring them forward any earlier. So we do try and bring them forward, and we did let the applicants know they would be late this year.
Okay. Councillor Law?
This is a question about the requested funding amounts. I kind of was under the impression that there was an actual hard and fast limit of 10% of the overall, and I know that 2 applicants did go over those. Is that a hard number? Has there been in the past any applicants that have received more than the 2,500 or 10%?
Several years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even before we amended the policy to bring that guideline in, we did do that. So for example, Carving on the Edge got $5,000 one year, but more recently it's not a strict requirement, but it is something that we've put in as a guideline. So I think it allows flexibility for extraordinary circumstances, and maybe, you know, something brand new or something that doesn't have as much secured funding from other places. And in fact, because it is brand new, is something that might be an example of an exception we would make to that. But typically in the past years, we have usually reduced it down to the 10% number, given the fact that we're always oversubscribed in this grant process. And so we just want to distribute the money kind of fairly. So it's up to us as council to determine if we think that the ones that have applied for a little bit more are it's okay to do so. And if everyone's comfortable with that, that's fine. What I think tends to happen over time is that if we don't stick to things, people will see that and then they'll ask for more, knowing that they might get cut back. So it's a bit of a strategy, I think, sometimes that gets used, and it's up to us to determine if that's okay or not. Councillor Anderson? Oh, sorry, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Chalmers had her hand up first and I forgot. Go ahead, Councillor Chalmers.
That's okay. I just wanted to let everybody know where I sit, that I would like to bring everything down to the 10% and fully fund using the extra money. That's just my position with it.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Chalmers. Yes, as you see, so many of the applicants are at the $2,500 mark. So I think it would be unfair that the applicants that didn't stick to that amount sort of get more funding. So I think so many applicants followed that guideline that I think we should stick to it.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor McQuaid?
Yeah, I definitely think you would just like to second Councillor Chalmers and what she said. If we have reallocated $5,000 from the council grants, that brings the total granting amount to $30,000, which allows us to grant 10% to each, bringing a few of one of the newer applicants, the Music for Young Children, up to a little bit more, which is in line with funding newer and perhaps a little bit more undersubscribed programs, and then sits us comfortably at 30,000 across the board and 2,500 for each applicant at 10%.
Thanks. So what are you suggesting then, that the Music for Young Children, you would suggest bumping it up from 1,500 to 2,500?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Does anybody? Okay, so what I'm hearing so far then is I think there's interest in bringing any requests that are above $2,500 to bring them down to $2,500 and to bump up the Music for Young Children from $1,500 to $2,500. Is there, yeah, okay, thumb up. Is there any disagreement with that or another suggestion? Councillor Law, something you want to?
We also have Tla-o-qui-aht Action at 1,000. Is that going to be bumped up to 2,500 as well? Is that the only thing that I would see is that there's, I mean, I like the idea both from Councillor Chalmers and Councillor McQuaid. But then we have to deal with budgeting. Like, where does that extra money go? That's something I'd probably maybe Nyla can talk to that.
So let me just see if I understand your question. You mean if after this there's still a little bit of underspent, if there's still some funds left over, where does it go?
No, I mean to each applicant they have to submit a budget.
Yes.
That shows where the money goes, and we look at that and decide, you know, based on the merits of the budget and the restrictions therein. So if we give them, say, $1,000 or $1,500 more, without it being included in a budget, I'm just saying, like, where are we responsible for that money? Where does it go? How do they allocate it? Can it then go to something that maybe we are not actually allowed to fund? That sort of thing.
Okay, thanks very much. Nyla, thanks.
Yeah, I do have some concerns with giving the applicant more than what has been requested because of the way the policy is worded and how we ask for a budget to be put together with other sources of funding. There's no guarantee that the applicant will be able to spend those funds, while the other applicants that did request more funds than $2,500 likely put a budget together with other sources of funding and would make it possible if they were to receive the $3,000. Those applicants are aware that there may be a restriction on the amount received. So I'm assuming that they've made accommodations for their project should they not receive the full amount requested. But there is no guarantee that the other applicants will be able to spend those funds. So I do have concerns with providing more than what has been requested.
Okay. Thank you. And perhaps one way of handling that would be to fund it at the request, and the funds that are not spent are going to, you know, they'll sit there for some months. And if there's, if council wants to make another call, or if council is approached, we can handle it on a one-by-one basis, or we can discuss with some of the other, in some of the, you know, arts, culture, and heritage groups, or with the task forces about if there's any recommendations from those places of ways to use funds, or they can just be carried over until next year. Councillor Anderson, did I see your hand up there?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of remind councillors, and maybe new councillors don't know, but in the past, if there were either unallocated or the project didn't go ahead and there were unspent funds, they were just sort of left there in case there was a late application of some sort or something came up after the deadline. So that has happened in the past as well. There's no real policy around that, but it's something that has happened. It could just be left in the council grants sort of slot in the budget, and if it's unspent, it would go into surplus. So that's how I've seen it go in the past. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Okay, so where I think we're at is to bring the funding down to no more than a maximum of 10% or 2,500, and to fully fund all others at their requested amounts. Okay, in that case, I will move that the Arts and Culture grants be awarded as follows. Ariosa Dance Society, $2,500. Carving on the Edge Festival Society, $2,500. Clackwood Action, $1,000. Clackwood Sound Community Theatre Association, $2,430. Friends of Clackwood Sound, $2,500. Music for Young Children, $1,500. Pacific Rim Arts Society, $2,500. Tofino Arts Council Society, $2,500. Tofino Community Food Initiative, $2,500. Tofino Jazz Festival, $2,500. Tofino Public Market Society, $2,000. And the West Coast Winter Music Society, $2,500.
Seconded.
Thank you. Any final comments or questions? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. That's everyone. Motion carried. Thanks, everybody, and congratulations to those recipients too. All right, Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, does staff need a motion to reallocate funds from the council grants to the arts and culture grants?
We did that when we approved the council grants. We took the underspent funds and allocated them to arts and culture grants, so we're okay. Councillor Law?
And any further discussion on policy or grant, the way we go about grading grants, that we'll bring that up at a committee of the whole.
Yes, I think that's the best place to do it. Good. Okay, great. All right, so we're going to move on to item 8.3, and Councillor McQuaid.
Yep, I'm going to recuse myself for 8.3 as I have an interest in a business that would benefit.
Thank you very much. So I think Elise is going to bump her into the waiting room. There she goes. All right, Brent, over to you, I think.
Hello again, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to provide a brief summary for our discussion today, and we can move forward from there. So what you would have seen in the report, the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch has recently released Policy Directive 2013, which I did attach as Appendix 2. This states that the LCRB may issue a temporary expanded service area authorization to food primary, liquor primary, and manufacturing licensees. This new authorization permits a licensee to temporarily expand their service areas until October 31st of 2020. The increased service area will allow businesses to serve patrons while complying with the provincial health officer's guidelines regarding physical distancing. Accordingly, food primary licenses, liquor primary and manufacturing licensees, so wineries, breweries, and distilleries, may apply to the LCRB for a temporary expanded service area authorization. To meet the intent of this temporary authorization, licensees will not be permitted to increase or exceed their currently approved seating or their occupant loads. It also means that they will not be able to increase their hours of service. So if they're currently operating till midnight, it stays at midnight. Licensees must comply with all other local bylaws and health and fire regulations. To make this process easier, there's an expedited online application through the LCRB website, which is available to licensees at no charge. So currently, or historically, to make these changes to their licenses, the LCRB would charge $440 for review of the plans, and at this point, they're waiving that fee. The District of Tofino, the current process as per bylaw 947/2003, when a business does seek to make changes to an existing liquor license, council has provided the opportunity to opt in with comments or recommendations and have staff collect the feedback from community members that may be affected. Or the other option is to opt out on providing any comment and have the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch collect that feedback from the community on their own. So the intent of the proposed amendment is to expedite the process that would allow businesses to temporarily expand licensed alcohol service areas until October 31st to ensure that businesses continue to operate under provincial social distancing requirements. So the last piece of this is the LCRB does acknowledge that some local governments may wish to provide the pre-approval for the whole community, but they also acknowledge that some council may choose to approve all individual requests on a case-by-case basis. So the important difference here is option 2, the case-by-case basis. That is our current practice. That's when the application comes in and we come to council and we discuss that. So the opportunity here, which staff is recommending, is that we put forward the amendment which would allow for that pre-approval. So are there any questions?
Yeah, are there any questions? Okay, there are none. Would somebody consider the motion?
I was just checking to make sure I had the I'll move that the District of Tofino Liquor Control and License Application Procedure Amendment Bylaw number 947.01/2020, attached as Appendix 1 to the report titled Liquor Control and License Applications Amendment Bylaw COVID-19 Recovery, dated June 9th, 2020, be introduced and read a first, second, and third time. And that the District of Tofino Liquor Control and Licensing Application Procedure Amendment Bylaw number 947/01/2020 be adopted. That staff be directed to advise the Liquor Cannabis Regulation Branch that the District of Tofino provides pre-approval of applications that are enabled under Policy Directive 2013.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any comment, final questions? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Thanks very much, Brent.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next is the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund and a report that was prepared by Keith. Councillor Chalmers, you...
Can we bring back Councillor McQuaid yet?
Yeah, we can bring back Councillor McQuaid, of course. Excellent. Great. Thanks very much. Okay, Keith, over to you. We'll just get you to unmute yourself. Yes, I know. It's got to happen at least once in a Zoom meeting, right? Terrific.
Perfect. There we go. Can you all hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, great. Good morning, Mayor and Council, and thank you for your time today. I'm here to ask for a resolution to support an application submitted to the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund to build capacity for the District of Tofino's Emergency Operations Center. Move my camera here a bit. The Community Emergency Preparedness Fund is a suite of funding programs intended to enhance the resiliency of local governments and their residents in responding to emergencies. And funding is provided by the province of BC and is administered by the Union of BC Municipalities, UBCM. So a council resolution is required to complete the final approval process. And staff has called upon council on 8 other occasions to ask for resolutions to support applications to the numerous streams of funding through the CEPF, which have all been successful, totaling $450,000 to date. This includes $150,000 in 2018 to complete coastal flood mapping and flood construction levels for land use and risk mitigation purposes. $150,000 in 2019 to complete a tsunami risk mitigation project, which is just wrapping up. Another 3 grants from 2018 to 2020, totaling $75,000, which are providing supplies at our emergency reception center and mobile disaster hub. As well as more training for emergency support services volunteers. And also $50,000 has been received through the first and second intakes of the Emergency Operations Center's funding stream in 2018 and 2019. So this current grant opportunity is the 3rd intake for the Emergency Operations Center stream of funding and provides up to $25,000 to continue the work of building local capacity in the EOC and improvement of resources that began in 2018. The District of Tofino provides an EOC within its geographic boundaries in order to meet our legal obligations under the Emergency Program Act and the Local Authority Emergency Management Regulations. An EOC is a physical or online, as we've pivoted to in COVID times here, location designated by the District of Tofino, where key personnel from involved departments or agencies gather to collaboratively support site activities, coordinate information, and provide strategic direction during an emergency or disaster. or disaster. And the need to develop the capacity of the EOC program has been recognized in the district's emergency program guide, objectives 5.1 through 5.4, as noted in the reports council there. So recommendations coming from the evaluation of EOC training and exercising activities conducted over the past year, as well as EOC team member input, has highlighted several areas for improvement of the program that inform the objectives for this proposed project. The first objective is continued training of EOC members. Training and exercising increases EOC members' confidence, promotes retention, and is key to having an operationally ready program. And in 2019, through the CEPF, the District of Tofino was able to offer EOC members 5 full-day training and exercise sessions ranging from incident command systems to tsunami evacuation. Currently, we've increased the capacity of our EOC to 18 members from the local government, cross-trained in at least 2 functions, and that's again a direct result of this grant. We've also made additional progress, including training of local RCMP, BC Ambulance Service, Tofino Volunteer Fire Department, Tofino General Hospital, West Coast Inland Search and Rescue, Emergency Support Services, and community members to be able to participate in an EOC within the appropriate function. So the second objective of the proposed project is the purchase of equipment to enhance EOC effectiveness and resilience. Specifically, we're looking at purchasing more kits, one for a finance assistant and one for a EOC planning situation position, as well as some emergency radio communications equipment. And then finally, the third objective is the development of a public emergency communications program. Currently, the District of Tofino uses emergency mass notifications, social media, district website, subscription email, and direct call out. And we've also added the capability of broadcasting emergency support information via our local radio station to our emergency notification methods. So the development of a public emergency communications program and training will improve the robustness and resiliency of our emergency communications efforts by enhancing our EOC's communication capacity with the community responding agencies, emergency support services, and emergency management BC. In sum, this grant opportunity through the CEPF would help build capacity in the district's human and capital resources and enhance our organizational readiness in responding to an emergency. The grant will provide $25,000 and fund 92% of the $27,100 project cost, pending a local government resolution indicating support for the proposed project. The District of Tofino's contribution will be $600 from our 2020 emergency program operating expenses and $1,500 in kind in staff time. Thank you again for your time and for your support of the emergency program, and I can take any questions.
Thank you very much, Keith. Thank you for continuing to do such a great job of looking for, finding, and getting funding for this program. Are there any questions? Councillor Steer.
I just want to thank staff once again for their incredible leadership. It's recognized provincially, your capacity building in this area, and I want to thank you very much once again. I did have just a comment in terms of the three areas of development for the EOC, and specifically on the development of the public emergency communication program. And I'm sure it's inclusive in there, but you may, as you know, the surrounding nations had activated their EOCs and were very active in communication with their area. And I was just in there, you're talking about your EOC's communication capacity with the community responding agency, ESS, and EMBC. And I'm sure it's there, but to have that inclusion of those other nations' EOC centers, and if possible, the integration of some of the training and that communication capacity within there. Thanks again, Keith, for all that work.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks. The point well taken there, Councillor Steer. Yeah, in the report to council, it does. Sorry about that. In the report to council, it does mention that the training is open to the region, and that includes all the First Nations in the region as well. And then, yes, certainly, in terms of communications with EOCs, we've been in contact with House It and Tla-o-qui-aht EOCs fairly substantially throughout this entire process with COVID-19, and that's something that we look to carry forward here. We've developed a West Coast regional EOC coordination call, and again, it's looking at lessons learned from this event. That's really enhanced our abilities to communicate, and we're looking to carry that forward moving out of this.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? No? Okay. Turn your minds to the motion.
I'll move that the District of Tofino Council supports the Communications Training and Equipment Project as submitted to the 2020 Emergency Operations Center and Training Programs, and that the District of Tofino staff be directed to provide overall grant management for the project as submitted under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund.
Thank you. Moved and seconded by Councillor McMaster. Any final comment or question? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Okay, so now we turn to business that's initiated by council members, and we're going to start off with the notice of motion on the Different Together pledge from Councillor McQuaid, and I will ask Councillor McQuaid to introduce it. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor Osborne. Yeah, to council and staff, I'm really grateful to be able to present this motion to you. A little bit of background, this pledge was initially crafted in response to race-based discrimination and violence directed at BC's East Asian population. But I do feel that it's grown in salience as the intervening weeks have passed, and some in Tofino have begun to tune into a conversation around racism and systemic violence that's been going on for a long time. I don't think that we often bring these pledges forward as a council, and I understand why. They can look like they pertain little to the fire, sewer, and water that we're tasked to deal with, and they can run the risk of sounding like lip service. I'm bringing forward this notice of motion today because I do believe that it has the capability to be more. As a local government, we do deal with infrastructure, land use, transportation, the basic nuts and bolts that we physically build a community in and on. Each decision made about that infrastructure is made by us, guided by staff, adheres to policy that's made by us, guided by staff, over and over in kind of a systemic loop. These decisions reinforce what we as a council and a community believe and how we think. And I believe that if we are interested in creating community as least as strong and resilient as our infrastructure and as equitable as it's needed, it requires that as a council, we examine our decisions, the community we hear, and those that we don't. To take a pledge and to oppose racism and to speak up isn't lip service. It's to be actively involved in the anti-racist work of building resilient community with everyone in it, and with each decision we make here about transportation, about affordable housing, and about fire, sewer, and water. I think that this is an opportunity to be accountable and to think critically about moving forward with integrity and doing better in all of our decisions. I want to say that I'm really grateful for the support of our council and staff in bringing forward this motion, and in particular to the words of Councillor Steer when I mentioned this to him. And he reminded me that yes, that while words are not actions, they often prompt them. So if you are all right with that, I am going to read the motion and then I'll ask for comments. So I'm going to recommend that the District of Tofino Council support, oh, nope, that's not what I'm looking for. I clicked the wrong one. The motion is, whereas the District of Tofino Council is inclusive and respects people of all ethnicities, cultures, and faiths, and their contributions to our collective well-being, and whereas the District of Tofino Council holds diversity as a fundamental value at the heart of the success, strength, and resilience of our communities, workplaces, schools, public and private institutions. Now, therefore, the Council of the District of Tofino pledges to uphold and promote these values and commits to speaking up to oppose racism and hate in all of its forms.
Thank you. I'd be happy to second that motion. And now invite any questions or comments that members of council might have. Councillor Chalmers.
I just want to thank Councillor McQuaid for bringing this forward, and I agree as well that while words can sound like lip service, I agree with what Councillor Steer said, is that they can spur into action and remind ourselves in our decision making. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Anderson.
Yes, just like to thank Councillor McQuaid for bringing this forward. Not to detract or take away from the motion, I think we're also, the motion doesn't capture all marginalized communities, and it's addressing specifically race and ethnicity, which is certainly timely and very thoughtful. But I think we need to go further and bring another motion forward to address some communities that may be missed in this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Anyone else? Okay, I will call the question then. All in favor of the motion? Thank you. That's unanimous and the motion is carried. And I also want to echo those words of thanks to Councillor McQuaid for bringing this forward, and to your point that you're correct, we don't often do these kinds of pledges, and I think, well, I know, I look forward to seeing what comes of this, and I think there's more actions to be taken by the District of Tofino and by this council, and I think we will see them in the coming weeks, months, and years. So thank you very, very much. All right, moving into committee and external appointment verbal reports. We have a few today. So I will start off with, I'll try to keep this quite short this time around, an update on the two task forces, the Economic Recovery Task Force and the Community Health Task Force. And over the last 2 weeks, the Economic Recovery Task Force has met twice and was able to collaborate with the District of Tofino and the District of Ucluelet, the Vancouver Island Tourism Vancouver Island, and released an economic impact survey, which closes tomorrow. So urging all businesses and anyone who knows anyone who is an employer, a nonprofit organization, for example, to complete that survey. We continue to deal with a lot of really kind of hands-on things that will help businesses, from the social distancing decals to the work that we've just seen in council today around liquor licensing, around amendments to allow private businesses to expand into parking lots and into patios, things like that, the zoning amendments. We've also had some good discussion there around how to reach some of the smaller businesses that we may not be capturing or seeing captured in the Chamber of Commerce roundtable. So reaching the smaller motels, the smaller or the short-term rentals and places like that. We continue to have really excellent discussions about housing and mental health, and realizing how foundational those are, and in this time of COVID recovery, that they have become even more important in the community. We have talked about advocacy work that needs to be done on behalf of the business community moving into the fall and winter, particularly around business supports and programs from other levels of government and other organizations. And we've had some excellent conversation about communications between First Nations and the District of Tofino and the business community, and understanding what the perspectives are of First Nations about activities starting to resume in their territories. So most notably water-based activities that would bring visitors into their territories. And that is a very important and ongoing discussion. At the Community Health Task Force side of things, again, we continue to focus on child and youth services and education, having Drew from School District 70 to tell us about the reopening of schools, and we'll be hearing more from him this week on how that's been going, and on the reopening of the Child Care Center and the importance of that. In addition to that, senior supports, and really with both task forces, the issue around communications. And so tomorrow we will be publishing a letter jointly from the districts of Tofino and Ucluelet in the Westerly News for our constituents and West Coast residents here. And then with both of the task forces, because what's come to light through Emergency Management BC and the way that they are, or in this case, are not able to fund COVID recovery work, we've made the decision to collapse the two task forces into one. So starting this week, we will have a larger meeting of both task forces. And then I think it's the right time to do this, because to continue to talk about things like housing and mental health are things of importance, not only to business, but of course to community health providers, Island Health and others. So I will stop there, and I will look to Councillors McQuaid and Steer if you had any additional comments you want to make about the task force work. Councillor Steer.
No, I think you've summarized correctly, and I think the only thing that I wanted to add was a bit of disappointment with the province in terms of the notion that recovery is an integral part of the planning, and that it wasn't recognized from a funding perspective. And I do appreciate there are 186 municipalities in British Columbia. But some of the communities, such as a rural one, such as ourselves, do face probably some more issues that other municipalities might not have to deal with. And I just wanted to express my disappointment on that, and that hopefully that there was further communication with the province through a municipal group moving forward to indicate that those areas are critically important, and our ability to fund those, we're limited in our capacity. And I know we had talked briefly about RMI communities, maybe bringing that forward, who may be more impacted. But I just wanted to bring that up. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Councillor McQuaid.
Thank you. I think that you've summed everything up about the task forces. I'm really looking forward to having joint discussions and laying them together and seeing what comes of that. I think that it is the right time to do that. So while I agree with Councillor Steer, you know, this isn't ideal. Yeah, I do believe that we'll be able to come out of it a little bit stronger on both sides. So looking.
Thank you. Any questions from other members of council? Councillor Anderson.
I'm just wondering if these task force meetings, they're open to the public, and the public can sit in on the meetings by Zoom, or how does that work?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So
myself, I wouldn't mind sitting in on one.
The task force meetings are closed to the public, so they're not a committee of council, and they are not subject to the same requirements that a committee of council would be. So the terms of reference for the two task forces are in the recovery plan, which I think we brought to council last week. It's been in the package a couple of times, and I definitely invite you to have a read and ask if there are any questions. We did make a decision to structure it this way to really enable a free-flowing information between the different parties, and recognizing especially that there are difficult subjects to discuss. And while there are no you know, there's no quorum of council there, council business is not advanced at a task force meeting. It was important to us to have a very honest and frank conversation about some very, very difficult issues. So the advice that comes out is all public, that is communicated to the public. We produce reports of each meeting so that people understand the flavor and what is being discussed. And we've seen a number of staff reports that have come to council that are the direct products of recommendations that come through the task force and through the business community in particular. So that was the decision that was made.
Okay, thanks for reminding me and clarifying that. And I think it's good that it's also spoken in an open public council meeting here. We did have some criticism of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, turn it over to Councillor Steer for the Tofino Harbour Authority update.
Thank you, Mayor Osborne. Yeah, as you may imagine, at our board meeting, the main issue that had been identified was the implementation of COVID protocols for the Tofino Harbour Authority managed facilities. And I just want a very large shout out to our harbour manager, Julie Haddo, who's done an exceptional job of bringing this forward. And, just as an example, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans at the end of March had indicated that basically it was going to be business as usual. And Julie was the first one in the Harbour Association arena that pointed out it can't be business as usual, that there are many impacts that this has to coastal communities and to the actual users of the facilities itself. So she's the one that brought this forward, and it had moved all the way up these concerns to actually to the ministerial level. So once again, her advocacy was helpful for all of the harbour authorities in British Columbia. That being said, she, in those responses, and I won't go into all the details, but she has been in a lot of conversation with the District of Tofino. She wanted me to pass on how helpful and supportive the district has been. And in that area, it was especially around the area of messaging, so that the messaging was consistent with the District of Tofino and the Harbour Association, and that actions were in tandem with the District of Tofino. So that she wanted me to reiterate once again how supportive the District of Tofino staff have been in that area. In terms of facilities, it has been very busy. There have been several fisheries that have been ongoing. the crab fishery. We've had the First Nation fisheries has been active, as well as the continuation of aquaculture harvesting in the area that's specific to shellfish. So it's been very busy with also active users at the harbor in terms of recreational boaters, but also the offshore residents that utilize our facilities for their comings and goings in and out of Tofino. So been very busy there. The only thing we'll add, there has been just recently, I was contacted by Small Craft Harbors. There was work that had not been finished, some of the large projects at Wing and Lane and Armitage. There was a complete redoing of the wharf heads and deckings. It was quite a substantial project that had been put on hold. And Small Craft Harbors was asking directly how the community felt about the resumption of those projects at this time. And in conversations with Mayor Osborne, we wanted to extend forward that we are comfortable with the resumption of those projects. They had indicated that their construction sector areas had implemented COVID protocols, and we were quite satisfied that they were responsible in that area. And the last thing was that we had sent a letter to the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, who appoint a member similar to the mayoral process of appointing someone from council to sit on the Harbor Authority Board. We sent a letter indicating that that position is open, and we're looking forward to having it filled. The previous position was held by the previous chief, Elmer Frank, who still sits on our board, but in the fishing sector. So that sector has been left open, and we're looking forward to having it filled. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much. Any questions for Councillor Steer? All right. Thank you for the report. Over to Councillor McMaster and the library.
Okay, the Board of Trustees met on May the 30th. I'll start off with some of the good news first. You may have read in the press that the provincial government awarded $3 million to BC libraries, which sounds great. Only $1.2 million to Vancouver Island, of which Vancouver Island Regional Library share was around 300,000, which, considering we were hoping to get 800,000, isn't so great, but it's better than a kick in the teeth. The other bit of good news is fines for children for returning books late has been eliminated. Much of the meeting was spent with presentation of the COVID recovery plan for reopening libraries. It's quite an extensive plan. First thing is all the libraries have to be inspected. I think that's going to take a bit of time. And knowing what I know about the building, I am not too optimistic about when our library will reopen. And finally, keeps on being reported that Tofino Council is reviewing shovel-ready service lots for a new library. And I think now that the gymnasium has fallen by the wayside, that we really need to get on with this. So I would like staff to start to move that towards the front burner.
Thank you for that.
Any questions?
Councillor Steer?
Councillor McMaster, I just was curious on the shovel-ready plans. Was it specific for staff to start looking at suitable locations? I know that there had been some discussions with other agencies about a co-sharing. Was that specific on municipal lands that you're talking about for that shovel-ready plans to move forward?
Correct. I think I think the last time we talked about this, we were discussing up by the community hall.
Yeah, we had a process in place moving forward with the Tla-o-qui-aht Biosphere Trust, looking at the lot behind the municipal hall, and I think quite a bit of time has elapsed, and would be good to have this come back. And maybe Bob is here on the line. not to put Bob on the spot, but just to say, just to ask maybe, is this something that you think that you have within the staff capacity to bring back to council, maybe at a committee of the whole meeting again, just to discuss location and what we can do to move forward on this now that it doesn't look like we'll be with the CBT?
Yeah, it certainly is something that's been on our radar. You know, some the events of the last few months have kind of overtaken this as a priority, but it's something we do want to get back in front of council.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor McMaster, for bringing that up. I agree. Okay. All right. And then finally for council appointments, we have Councillor Chalmers attended our first Tourism Tofino meeting. A few words from that. Thanks.
Thanks. Now, it wasn't too meaty with most of the staff is laid off right now. And the meeting was a few weeks ago and a lot's kind of changed since then. But overall, there was an update on the task force activities and discussions about the visitor center reopening around the second week of June. So that should be soon. They've been working on their procedures and protocols. There was no STR reporting as all of the hotels had been closed. However, since then, some hotels have opened, so they are working on tracking occupancy rates to inform the marketing activities as well as their members, the district and the hospital. Some of the recovery marketing include distributing information packages to members that include key messages on recovery marketing plan with draft, about delaying, this was delayed to phase 3 about reopening, and then working on tips for traveling during COVID for guests coming. And as well, we got some information right after the meeting about marketing money. I'm just going to switch over to that. That the Tourism Industry Association of Canada lobbied the federal government for some funding, and as a result, Destination Canada announced that they will be reallocating $30 million to use from international marketing to domestic, and this will be reallocated to the provinces. So Tourism Tofino received a $154,000 grant that can be dedicated to marketing within the province. So that was good news, and it's helping them bring back some of their staff and resume working towards recovery. And that about summed it up.
Great. Any questions? Okay. Thanks very much for all the reports then. And that brings us to the end of the open part of the meeting, I think. And I don't think there's any Q&A, so there are no questions. So how about a motion to move in camera, please?
I can move that. I'll move that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91A and C of the Community Charter to discuss matters relating to personal information about an individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent, and employee relations.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Great. We'll just give ourselves a